All right, let's get started. So I feel like everything in Vegas should start with alcohol. Well, if you have ever done a wine tasting or gone to winery, you know the best way to drink a wine is to swirl it first for the best taste. Right? Well, I couldn't get the legal to approve to bring in the wine today, but we'll be talking about the best practices around mobile monitoring. Okay. I'm AJ. I'm the product manager for mobile and IoT products here at AppDynamics. And I'm supposed to show you guys this. All right, there you go. Notice, which you have probably seen 1,000 times so far, so I won't say what it says and move on. Only if this clicker works better. All right, there you go. So before we go too deep into the content, I wanted to get a sense of what the audience is like today. So raise your hand if you have been associated with a mobile team, if you have been an engineer, product manager, project manager, or have anything to do with the mobile team. All right, thank you. Looks like there's some good mix. The reason I asked that is I want to understand how deep I should go into the content and explaining the concepts. All right, so the plan of action for today is we'll first try to understand what the user expectations are. And I'll try to make a case for crazy user expectations these days. Okay. Next, we'll understand the best practices to optimize the user experience so you can meet these user expectations. And then finally, I'll leave some time for Q&A. Okay. So now that we have set up the ground, have you been ever that excited? You're that excited because you fixed an issue or somebody on your team fixed an issue, fixed a crash. And then they go to the release management. They cry before them to release that fix within the next few hours because your users are impacted. Right? So release management agrees, okay, because our CEO is saying or CIO is saying that we should release this and it has high impact, they'll go ahead and release it into the production. But this is what happens. All right. So this is what your customer is thinking. Sorry, I have to stay behind this, I think, behind this line. This is what your customer is thinking. Even after you have fixed an issue, they don't like you as much because they think that your application never works. And they are still going to the App Store to write bad reviews. So on the left side, I have the Apple App Store reviews, and on the right side, I have the Google App Store reviews, but the story is same. And I won't name the application here, and I won't name it because I worked on this application at one time. It has improved since then, but the picture is clear that this app is not getting a lot of love from customers out there. Right? At this point, we should really question if these App Store ratings really matter. Right? These are the reviews that users are going to write in the App Store. So they go into Apple App Store or Google App Store, and they'll write these reviews. But is anybody reading them at all? Do they matter? When somebody is downloading your application, do they look at these reviews? How do they compare you to other applications out there? So let's try to understand that. I think it is quite important. It is important for one reason, which is that there are millions of applications out in the App Store. There are more than 4.5 million mobile applications in the App Stores combining Google and Apple. Right? And that's not all the App Stores. Amazon and Windows have some of their own. But so there are a lot of applications. I was looking at a study yesterday, and the study says that there are more than 200,000 gaming applications in these App Stores. So imagine, if you are working for a gaming application, how does your customer decide whether they should download your game versus your competitor's game, which roughly does the same thing? Right. Now, another case is you lose out to customer acquisition. These mobile devices are a great way to acquire customers. They are a great way because a lot of these users are coming to mobile for the first time, or they are opening the app stores for the first time, or when they're searching for application, let's say music or games, they're searching and they have a bunch of results to look at. But if your application has a lower app store rating, then it doesn't show up at the top. Here's an example. You guys came to Vegas a few days ago, and I'm sure you've been eating good dinners. But when you search for dinner places around here, in most probable case, you go to an application like Yelp or Google or something. And these applications will tell you the proximity of the restaurants, but they'll also tell you the ratings of these restaurants. So if a restaurant is rated 1 star, would you want to go to that restaurant? Right? So similar thing works for the mobile as well. And there's really important aspect on why App Store ratings are important. And that aspect is that your family would think that you should change jobs. This has happened to me. When I worked for that 1-star app company, my wife would come to me and say, hey, my friend got this Shutterfly application. And it works great. And I know what she was pointing towards. Right? Well, so with all this, what I'm trying to say is that there is new normal in the market. And that new normal is that the user expectations go beyond just stuff working without errors. There was an era where if you got something to work without an error, as long as somebody could purchase an item, could make a transaction, could go to the next level in the game, you're good, right? But that's not true anymore. User expectations go beyond that. So let's look at some of those user expectations. So the first one is user expect the applications to be highly responsive. There was a time when Google and Microsoft came together to do a study. That was probably the only time they came together to do a study. And their study says that if a page takes more than 200 milliseconds to load, you start to lose on your revenue. Well, that can be good. 200 milliseconds, that comes down to 0.2 seconds, very close to how quickly your eye can blink. Right? So you need to have fast applications. And not just on one device, you need to have that across the devices. That experience needs to flow from iOS to Android to your browser. I'm having a tough time here. Then the second thing is the simple experience. The mobile devices really have a very small size compared to desktops. So you have limited real estate on those devices to present something to the user. And if you are putting like 1,000 data points on there or 1,000 info points, your users are not going to like it. So you need to provide an experience that's quick, that's simple, and that's achieving a goal. Right? And then finally, none of the applications are perfect out there. I haven't come across a single application where I haven't seen an issue. That issue can range from crash to slowness to errors to whatever, right? But when these issues occur, your customer support needs to be ready to respond to customer complaints. You need to really understand how long it is taking for you to identify an issue, to resolve an issue. There's a story from, one of my previous companies. What happened was when a customer complaint would come in, we would spend like half a day to a day just figuring out whose problem is it, whether it's the mobile team's problem versus backend team's problem, right? And that increases the time to identification for an issue. So you need to quickly identify what the issue is, where the issue is, and then resolve it. So now that I have made the case for what users are expecting, let's see what are some of the best ways to keep up with these crazy expectations. The first one is you need to have a holistic view of your application. By that, what I mean is if I have to tell you select one metric or one KPI, And if I give you what that KPI is responding to, you can tell me whether your application is doing fine or not. Okay. Or if I tell you to sit at the back of the room, you can tell me, looking at the screen, that your application is fine. Right? So you need to have that holistic view of your applications. Next is you need to identify business transactions. And each of these business transactions are goals that a user is achieving through your applications. There could be thousands of these goals, but you need to identify these few goals that if they won't happen, you are in big trouble, that your business is hurting big time. These could be somebody placing an order could be a business transaction. Somebody logging into your application could be a transaction. And I guess those are really important because if they cannot purchase, then you're losing out on the revenue. If they cannot log in, then you have no users. Right? And then you need to understand the visual flow of users. A lot of times what we do is we say, we know who our users are. But do you really know what they are doing on the application? So we need to know when they go from point A to B to C, what's the exact path they are following? Are they skipping B and going directly to C? And that's why application is behaving weird. So you need to have that visual of user flows. And finally, crashes are quite important for mobile devices. They're important because as your user is going through these flows and the application crashes, they have basically lost all their time. They have lost all their thought process, and they have lost it not because they did something wrong. They lost it because the application wasn't ready for them. Right. So that said, enough of slides. I'll jump into the best practices. I have 6 best practices to keep up with these user expectations and get to the view that you should be looking at to provide the best experience for your users. And in doing that, I want to start with a question. The question is, can you tell the health of your application in a second? Right? You're thinking, how is that possible? Right? Application is fine, I haven't heard from anybody. It's wrong, so it's fine. Well, you need, as I said earlier, you need to have that holistic view of the key performance indicators. So let's see in a demo how you can do that. I need to log in here. As soon as my screen comes up. And obviously the internet's not working. Give me a second. Wow. I'm going to give Wi-Fi a try. I was trying to use the wired network, and it's blanking on me. Looks like Wi-Fi doesn't like me anymore. There. Says I'm connected. Sorry about that, guys. Give me another minute here. so connection is back. It's good news. Let me try this. If this works, then I should be fine. At least the all right, there we go. So let's pick an application here. So on your left side, when you're looking at this scorecard, this is what we call mobile scorecard. Is this part of the screen. Can you guys see that at the back? All right. So looking at that check mark from the back of the room, you can say that the application is working out fine. Now it has all the details that you need. It has the details like crash metric, the slowness of the network, which is right here, and the errors that are occurring. But if I have to ignore all of that when that green check mark is on, I don't need to go any further, and I can be sure that the application is fine. I have a story around this scorecard. You guys see the last MLB World Series game in the Cubs and the Cleveland? It was a fun game. But if there was no scorecard and I joined the game sort of midway through, I wouldn't know what's going on in the game. That's literally what's happening with your application. Your application is being used by somebody else, who are your users, and you have no idea how they are using it. So even if you ask a few people how it's going, all they can tell you is, yeah, it's fine or it's not fine. Right? But you need that holistic view of that scorecard in order to tell you how that game progressed and how are you doing right now. And that's what I mean by mobile scorecards. All right. So let's switch back. And go to the next best practice. I call it whose problem is it anyway? If you have seen that TV series, Whose Line Is It Anyway? Comes pretty close to that. What I mean here is, to bring up the story that I was telling earlier, my manager would often come to me and say, hey, AJ. And I used to be an engineer at one point, so he would come to me and say, hey, AJ, looks like a lot of our users are having trouble connecting to our mobile application. Can you go look into it? I'd go look into it. I would say, yeah, everything's fine. I see a problem. I can reproduce it. But I see that problem. I don't think it's my problem because I haven't changed the code at all. It's a backend problem. Send it to the server team. Server team would say, no, not my problem. Maybe it's the database. And the database team would say, we haven't changed the schemas at all. We didn't release anything. How can it be our problem? So they'll run into circles like for a few days until somebody higher up on the chain would say, we need to solve this now. And then everybody would get into the war room and say, whose problem is it? Right? So, but that spent a lot of time. You guys have spent all of this time just figuring out who should look into the problem, let alone trying to figure out what the problem is. Right? And that's not really the right way. So let's get back to our demos here. I'll bring the, come on. All right, this is not a good day for me. know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go to the backups here. So this is what I mean by figuring out where the problem is. What you are looking on your left side is all the network requests that were made through the mobile application. And when you dig deeper into this mobile application, you can correlate and go to the back end to see which line of the code is causing the problem. And that looks something like that flow map on your right side. So looking at this, you can tell that the problem is actually coming from the database. Right? So now you can throw the ball over and say, this is the query that was running. It's taking too long to execute. And hence, it's not my problem, it's your problem. All right. So I have to do all these jumps today. I want to see this connect, actually. All right, I'll let you look at that while I fix this. It's not a pretty picture. The next best practice I want to talk about is, are you asking too many questions to your customers? I've seen multiple times when your users would call up and the customer support person or the engineer on the other side would say, so which device were you using? Were you using it on Wi-Fi? Were you in a train? Were you at home? These are not the right questions to ask to your users. There are questions even, send me the flow of the things you went through. That's the most common question I've heard asking to the users. That doesn't make sense at all, because you should have the ability to look at exactly what user did on your application. It's your application. You designed it. So let's look at one of those use cases here on how you can tell what your users did. And I would expect this to connect this time. All right, it's working. Bring it into the view. All right. So let's increase our time range to 1 day. What we are looking at is what we call sessions. And you guys might have heard about it. A lot of business IQ is driven by sessions because all of this session data is essentially the user data. What sessions are all the user journeys that have happened through your application. Right? So every single time a user has come to your application, done something, we have captured that. Right? So these are all the sessions. Let's say I have a user, and his name is Kyle. Kyle goes to Facebook and writes, this application is too slow for me. This e-commerce application is too slow for me. I wouldn't suggest anybody using it. Now you have network effects because all the other people who are on Facebook are afraid to use your application. But what you can do is you can look at exactly what Kyle did on your application. So these are all the sessions. So now I have filtered by Kyle. And these are all the sessions that Kyle went through, or all the user journeys for Kyle. Let's go deeper into what Kyle actually did. So on the left side, you are looking at a flow, a chronological flow of your screens that Kyle went through. So Kyle started with a login view. At some point went to list view, cart view, and then checkout. So those are the screens in the application that Kyle went through. And on the right side, here you're seeing the information on what Kyle actually did on each of these screens. Okay? So let's pick up the cart view screens. Looks like there was a network request made, and there was a system event. That system event is telling me that it's actually a Wi-Fi switch. But look at this. You're on this, when Kyle gets to the checkout view, there's this network connection that was made. Right? And it took almost about 16 or more than 8 seconds at least to execute. That's too slow. We already talked about how every 200 milliseconds you are starting to lose your revenue. And that's what has happened here. But what you should be able to do is you should be able to dig deeper from here, look at the flow map, and say exactly what took so much time. So there seems like there is this exit call, or actually this Oracle query that's running, and that's taking about 8 seconds to execute. And that's most of the held up here. What you have essentially done here is, instead of asking all those questions to Kyle on what Kyle was doing, what environment was Kyle on, what was the mobile device he was using, you have looked at exactly what Kyle did, what flows Kyle went through, and even where the problem is. Right? So now you can reply to Kyle, hey, Kyle, sorry about your experience. We figured this was a slow database query that was running at the time. We have fixed it, and you should be able to try the application again. Right? And now you're not only pleasing Kyle, you're showing to other customers who are on Facebook that you replied to Kyle in a minute and everything was fine. Right? And that's much better experience. So let's switch to, so that's what I mean by when I say empower customer voice with technical context. It's like when they say something's not working, you should have the context. Let's look at the fourth one. While all of this is important, another thing that's important is who's using your application and how are they using your application. Right? And these things are important to understand when you look at a problem, whether you should really look at it in sort of a serious way. So if you have only 1% of your users on Android and all of other users on iOS, you don't want to spend too much energy on fixing sort of issues on Android that's taking too long to fix. Right? Because while those users are important, you got bigger problems to care about. Okay? So you need to understand the customer environments. So in trying to do that, let's get back to our demo here. And I want to go to usage stats. And what you have on the usage stats is the segmentation of users by devices, by carriers, connection types, OS versions, application versions, geographical regions. So you're not making guesses. If somebody from UK calls up and says the application is not working, and you only have 10 users in the UK, you don't want to worry about this user. Right? You have other things to worry about. So you should be able to do all of that. Especially in case of mobile, the application versions are quite important. And they are important because once you have released a new version of the application, you cannot replace the previous version. It's not a website which you will overwrite and everything new will show up. You release this application to App Store, and users decide when they update these applications. Right? So if you have released a fix, you want to be monitoring what's your user segmentation for the newer versions versus the older versions. Right? Let's go to our 5th use case. And this is my favorite one. This is my favorite because my manager would come to me and say, hey, AJ, the application is crashing in production. Users are complaining about it. Go fix it. I look at the stack trace because I'm using some tool to identify what the stack trace looks like at the time. And I'll see, okay, this particular line of code is crashing. All right. But this line of code is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And I try to put all my minds to it and see what's wrong with this line of code. It's executing fine for a lot of users. If your 100,000 users are seeing problem out of 10 million users, then that line of code must be working fine for those other users. And only for a specific user, it's not working fine. So it's not really so much of a code problem. Right? What's important is, well, let me finish the story. So I'll go back and I'll try to reproduce this issue. So I'll start with logging into the application. I'll pick up some photos. I'll upload it to the cloud, and I'll purchase an item. Everything works out great. So I can't reproduce the problem. I'll go back to my manager and I'll say, can't reproduce this problem. Must be for this particular specific user. We don't need to worry about it. And then soon that crash will turn in, one crash will turn into 10,000 crashes, or turn into 1 million crashes. Right? What happened wrong there was I had all the stack traces. I had the state of the device. I even know how the application works. But if you think about it, your testers have done all the testing. All the unit tests ran fine. You have actually developed the application, and it's working fine for most of the users. So it's not about something that you have done wrong. It's something about the user context in here. It's about what user was doing in your application. Right? So you need to know exactly the steps they took before getting to that crashes. Exactly how the code behaved while they were taking those steps. So if they hit a button, you need to know that they hit button A. And at that point, this network connection was fired, and the response came out okay. Then they went on, and they scrolled the screen. And they went on, put in something into the text field. You need to know all these steps in order to be able to reproduce this problem. Right. So let's try to do that through our demo. Demo God is happy with me so far. So this is the crash sort of dashboard. What you have on the screen is sort of all your crashes sorted by impacted users. So most important crashes are at the top of your page. You have a filter up at the top over here. Let me zoom into it. So you can say, give me only the crashes for this app version because I know this is the version that my users are using. And even if you don't know it, you can say, give me all the versions. Let's go into one of these crashes. And when you go in there, you have this stack trace. There's something different about this stack trace. What this is doing is saying, we have already identified some important parts of your stack trace. So don't go through this all the threads. There are 6 threads running at the same time. And even within the thread that has crashed, there are a whole bunch of lines of code that you shouldn't worry about, because either you don't have a control over, or those are not the ones that are causing crashes. Right? What is important is these few lines of code. And when we talk about how to understand what user did before getting to this crashes, and hit that view session button. So user saw a crash on the logout view, looks like. Tried the logout view again, went to the settings, went to the game view. And within that logout view, you can see that there was a network connection change at this point. There was a crash here, and then the user came back to that application and clicked onto a button. Now you know exactly what user was doing. Did user come back to your application? And as soon as that user came back, what action did she take? So having that context of the user is super important. Let's keep going. The final part that you have been hearing all about throughout this AppSphere is business IQ. You're not creating these applications just for the fun of it. Right? You are creating these applications to achieve a goal. That goal could be generating more revenue. Goal could be bringing in more engagement. But you have a goal through these mobile applications. So you need to connect these business goals to your application performance goals, your IT goals. So let's see how we can do that. And this part of the demo might take a minute for me to set up. So give me a second here. All right, we are good here. So let's look at 1 week of data. Okay. And we'll look at the mobile sessions data. So what mobile session data is what we were looking at earlier. Every single user journey that has been taken on your application connected to all the data points on how your code was behaving at the time. So I have all this in the data format, but I also have all this in the visualization format. So we'll create a few widgets here. So I'm going to create a custom widget. And what I want to do is I want to select a country. And let's select United Kingdom here. And what I want to see is, for all my UK users, what does the device segmentation looks like? Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. Put the model here. Build a pie chart. And there you go. So what you have over here is all your user segmentation into UK. And this was just one of the widgets I built. You can do, out of these all 40, 60 fields, some 40 to 50 fields, you can build whatever combination you want. But you should be able to understand your users based on your requirements and not on how the data is presented to you in a pre-baked format. So now that we know our users, let's add this widget to our dashboard here. So that's all good. Next, I want to go and build a funnel widget. I'll take out the United Kingdom here. And what I'm trying to do is I'm looking for session grid. These are all the user journeys counted as a distinct user journeys. I'll say US users. I'm going to go ahead and select the country here. Let's zoom in a little bit. And so let's choose United States. All right. So I have about some 5,600 users in the United States over the last 1 week. It's another funnel step. I want to see all the users who are in the United States and logged in to my application. Let's zoom into it. So this is the activity. The activity is telling you all the screens, all the distinct screens that have that have users taken on your application. So I'm going to select login view. And let's finally see all the users who logged in and went to the settings screen. Okay. Select another activity in here. And the activity is the settings screen. All right, looks good. I have a typo here. All right. So this is your funnel. Looks like less than 1%, 0.1% users are going to your settings screen. So when you hear about problems on your settings screen and somebody says, I can't change my profile picture, think about how much you need to pay attention to that. Because not many people are trying to actually do that. Right? 0.09% of your users are trying to do that in the US. Right? So that's what's connecting the business performance to your application performance. All right, now that we have gone through the business use case, let's quickly recap all the best practices. So the first best practice is to have a holistic view of your KPIs. Understand what your KPIs are and how your application is doing in 1 second. Okay. Know a quick way to tell what's causing the issue. Right? Don't do this blame game between the teams. Know where the problem is and fix that problem. And that's what would make your business better than your competitors. Empower your customer voice with technical context. When they call in or when they try to reach out to you, don't ask them too many dumb questions. Know what they did and be ready to give them the answers that they need. Understand your customer environments. So when you're planning for next set of features or when you're fixing an issue, know how important it is. Reproduce crashes with certainty. Don't just send it over to your testers or somebody else in your team and say, can you try to reproduce this for me, please? And they're like, I can't reproduce it. Don't let that happen. You have all the tools and all the knowledge and all the data points to see exactly how to reproduce that problem. And then correlate the business to application performance. You're not building the application for the fun of it. You're building to achieve a goal. Make sure that your goals with the IT, with your code on mobile, with your code on browser is connected to your business goals. Okay. With that, I'll take questions. We have about 6 minutes, and I'll stay after this as well in case you have specific questions. All right, so I can bring in the mic. All right.
When you were showing the funnel view and you were adding steps to it, do the steps have to be in sequence in that order for that to filter and show the results? Or is it that like the user just had to log in and at any point in time they had to hit login and the settings page, for example?
Yeah, so let me get on the side here. So what I tried to do there was basically say, give me all the users who have gone through this particular flow, who have been a US users, have first logged in, and then went on to the settings screen. It doesn't have to be in that order. Like it really depends on what kind of business and application you have. Right? Your users would go through a bunch of screens, and you can say, give me the flow where first user went to settings screen and then logged in. And you could do that as well. Does that answer your question?
If there was items in between, would it still show up in the results?
Yeah. Thank you.
If a user went to another screen in between logging in and the settings screen, would that view still pick it up because they did in fact go to the settings screen at any point in time? Okay.
Yeah, so I would say, I don't care about any in-between steps. all I care about all the users who are on the login screens and all the users who are in the settings screen. Okay. All right. More questions? All right, we're here.
AJ, with the funnel view and you see maybe a very low conversion rate, could one visualize crashes? Maybe you don't have a lot of conversions to like a checkout step because the application is crashing.
Yeah.
How would you see that in your visualization?
Yeah, so what you can do is, I just happened to pick up, give me all the screen sort of flow, right? So I said, give me somebody who went to screen login and then screen settings view. Right? But you can say, give me all the users who went to login screen and then saw a crash. And then you'll see that filter. So in fact, the first step I did was give me all the users who are just the US users, right? So I wasn't looking at the world. So in the similar way, there are a bunch of fields, and you can select one of these fields and say, give me all the users who went to login screen and saw a crash. You can even say, give me all the users who went to login screen and saw a null pointer exception. So it doesn't have to be all the crashes. It could be a very specific one that you want. Okay?
Yeah. Just my question was about the licensing. So what you showed, is that out of the box with mobile RUM, or is that the mobile analytics piece that you have to add on top?
So for the first 5 use cases, minus the business IQ one, were all part of the mobile RUM. The business IQ one is part of our peak edition. So it will be part of this one license that you get, and that will include both mobile RUM, browser RUM, browser RUM, synthetic, and the analytics. So for the newer licenses that we are creating and selling, it would be part of the same thing. If you had previous licenses, then you would need to sort of switch into this new version. Edition. Yeah. So it's called EUM Peak Edition, which is EUM, end user monitoring, plus the analytics or business IQ. Yeah. Other questions? All right. Thank you guys for coming. Sorry for the trouble with the demo. These things happen right in time. But I'm here to answer more questions if you guys have any. Thank you.